Chapter 10, Wednesday, October 8th to Friday, October 17th, 1777. In those first days, I did not regret enlisting. The Army fed me regular. I had a blanket, boots, and a musket. Sleeping with 5 fellows in a small tent was a bit of a challenge on account of the snores and farts, but at least I was warm enough. Most of the wagering around the campfire centered on how long the war would last. Eben thought we'd be free of duty by November. Others said Christmas. One fellow in our tent, a fuss-pot old tailor with watery eyes named Sylvanus, said we'd be in service for years. He was not well liked. Uncle Sergeant, I thought of him in that manner, though I was careful never to address him so, teamed me with Eben and posted us to the river to keep watch for any British boats. We saw snapping turtles, hawks, the paw prints of a large bear, and countless leaves swirl to the ground. The only redcoats we saw were deserters, approaching with their hands in the air. The British were trapped and hungry. They had no supplies. They could not survive the march north to Canada. To the east lay the New Hampshire grants, bristling with patriots. To the west stretched wilderness and certain death. Our army waited in the south, ready to finish the job started on the battlefield. More than a week after the battle, General Burgoyne finally agreed to surrender. Messengers rode back and forth between the two camps, always with a white flag flying so as nobody would shoot at them. And arrangements were made so that the American army could accept all of Burgoyne's soldiers and prisoners. Our days guarding the river ended. I bet the turtles were grateful. The officers ordered all Continentals and militiamen to line both sides of the road for the official surrender. The day was cool and damp, with dark clouds to the north that Eben said were heavy with snow. He liked to pretend he knew all about the weather, so I figured we were in for a stretch of sunshine. While we waited, I piled stones next to my boots. I had a handful of acorns in my right pocket, too. Eben asked vexing questions about my weapons, but I didn't answer. Eventually, he gave up and dove into a story about his mother's uncle's cow that gave birth to a calf with 2 heads. One was the head of a goat, the other a cat. A terrible omen, he said, that foretold the fire that burned the old man's barn and the fox that killed all his chickens. I rolled my right boot back and forth over a stone that was round as a wicket ball. Near a year earlier, I'd been with the American troops who were captured by the British at Fort Washington. They marched all 2,000 of us down to the Greenwich Road to New York City, where a crowd of lobsterbacks and Tories threw eggs and rotted garbage at us, screaming curses, foul names, and insults. We had no firewood in the prison, no glass in the windows. They fed us spoiled meat and moldy biscuits when they remembered to feed us all. Within weeks, hundreds had died of cold and pestilent fevers. If Isabel hadn't stolen me out of there, I'd be long dead too. I gave my ear a hard tug to force all memories of Isabel into retreat. As the British marched by in defeat, I aimed to pay them back for the retreatment of me. Pity that I'd not thought to bring a bucket of horse dung. Distant drums began to beat. Our regimental drummers picked up a call and rattled their instruments like approaching thunder. "Here they come," someone hollered. Our fifers burst into song, playing Yankee Doodle to insult our enemy. We all stood straight, muskets at our sides, performing a patriot gauntlet stretching as far as the eye could see. The lobsterbacks came first, the regimental flags fluttering weakly. Their arms swung freely, for they had surrendered their guns before this forced parade. Many of the arms were bandaged, the famous redcoats torn in their flight through the wilderness. Their breeches were more mud-stained than white. Nearly every man had lost buttons from his coat. I stuck my hand in my pocket and gripped a fat acorn. I would not throw the first one, for that would bring too much attention to myself. But as soon as the throwing started, I'd join in the fray with pleasure. The British passed us row by row by row. On the whole, they were shorter than we were, and mostly man-aged. Their uniforms, though dirty, made them look to be a proper army. They moved as one body with thousands of arms and legs. We looked like what we were, an army of farmers and poor craftsmen. Some rebels were white-haired grandsires. We had boys younger than me, with no hint of whiskers or manhood upon them. Our fellows of middle years came from New England, New Jersey, New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Fishermen, farmers, cobblers, preachers, schoolteachers, woodsmen, and every other job under the sun. We conversated and joked mostly in English, but some spoke in languages from over the ocean, and others in the speech of those mountains, for Oneida, Stockbridge, Tuscarora, and Narragansett warriors stood with us. We wore all manner of shirts, waistcoats, breeches, and shoes, though some were barefooted. Looking down our lines, I saw every possible color of hair and eye, though some were missing an eye and others were bald-headed, as well as colors of skin, from the darkest black of men born in Africa to the snow-white pallor of the Scotsmen, and all shades in betwixt the two. The appearance of our army recalled the variations of the trees and the forest behind us. Each soldier stood tall, each soul afire with pride. But no one threw a thing. They didn't shout insults or mock our captives. Even Eben's mouth was closed. "Why is no one jeering?" I whispered. "We should shame them." "Uncle said we should give them honor," he said quietly. "This is the first time a British army has surrendered, ever." I tightened my fist of acorns. They had not honored us in the prisons of New York. Was not the point of war to beat the enemy, to make them feel the pain of losing? The drums and fifes ceased. Our ranks stood silent as walls of granite. The enemy continued to march, their boots shuffling along the dirt road. After the British came the Hessians, Germans who fought on the British side for money. Most of them wore green uniforms, some blue. All were filthy, but their curled mustachios were combed neat. After the Hessians came their women and a few children, and a handful of soldiers leading the animals that had become German pets, raccoons, fawns, and 2 bear cubs. We stood for hours, all that afternoon, as our 6,000 prisoners paraded between our lines in defeat. I did not understand why, but I chose the course of honor. I stood, shoulder to shoulder with the other patriots, in a powerful silence. When all the prisoners had marched down to the clearing where they would have been guarded until they were escorted to Boston, I took myself down to the river. The turtles were all in hiding, so I threw my weapons at the last of the sun on the water.